Greetings, this is Chris Ruby. He is Nostalgic Catholic with another Isaac Asimov short story. Now, this is one I've already covered in some detail because it has been included fairly close to how it was as the first story section of Forward the Foundation. But so that doesn't leave me much to discuss because I've already covered the differences between the story as it appears in this magazine versus how it appears in the book. But there's still some details of the story that I can get into, and so this won't be a totally wasted installment. So, as you can see, page 18, it's a novella for the Foundation of Isaac Asimov. So now we go to page 18. You have some artwork here, and some of these are various different figures in the story. I can't see if you all know who's who. A nice blurb. So let's read the blurb. And there's two blurbs. There's a little picture that says, "We proudly present the first Foundation novella in 41 years. While 3 new Foundation novels have been published in the intervening time, the last short story appeared, not counting the excerpt, which is just an excerpt, because that wasn't a self-contained story, it just showed a couple chapters, but okay. The last short story, as a real story in its own right, appeared in the January 1950 issue of Astounding Science Fiction. It is with great pleasure that we continue this classic series. Look for the Foundation by Isaac Asimov. Okay, to be published. Well, it wasn't published yet. Art, Gary Freeman. Introduction, Forward the Foundation. The Foundation saga deals with the fall of the First Galactic Empire 20,000 years from now and the Dark Age that followed. The First Foundation and the Second Foundation are struggling to ameliorate the hard times and to establish a second and better galactic empire. Their guidance in this is the science of psychohistory, devised by the great mathematician Hari Seldon, which has the capacity to prevent future trends in a statistical, if not absolute, sense. The first 3 books of the saga, Foundation, Foundation and Empire, and Second Foundation, written in the 1940s, cover the first 3 centuries after the fall of the Galactic Empire. The next 2 books, Foundation's Edge and Foundation and Earth, written in the 1980s, cover the next 2 centuries. The 6th book of the saga, Prelude to Foundation, returns to a period 50 years before the opening of Foundation and investigates the youth of Hari Seldon and the beginnings of psychohistory. In the 7th book, now being written, the 50-year period between Prelude to Foundation and Foundation is taken up. Hari Seldon ages and psychohistory matures. What follows is part 1 of the new book, Forward the Foundation. There will be 4 more parts if I can manage it. As we know, that turned out to be a bit of an if, because he was able to get 2 more in the magazine format, which I intend to cover as much as I'm dealing with this one. 1 more written for the book, and another one intended by him, just never happened. So we start with Hari Seldon, getting these concerns from Hugo Amaral and even also from Doris Venedig, and about this strange new jingoist named Joranum, who's got this kind of a movement going. And they're kind of worried about him because it's like he could really, unseat the emperor ultimately. First by trying to replace the first minister, who happens to be Demerzel, and if you follow the story, you know that and it's mentioned here as well, that was actually one who was once known as Robot Daneel Olivaw, Elijah Bailey's one-time partner way back in the old stories of the Caves of Steel, the Naked Sun, and so forth. So, at any rate, Seldon is walking along through the campus because he's one of their mathematics professors, and he hears a crowd, and he goes over to see what it is. And one of Joranum's assistants, not Joranum himself, is giving kind of like a talk there and getting people all riled up or something. But he didn't bother to do this. The simple paperwork to apply for permission to give a speech on campus. A simple procedural detail that I don't know what Seldon would have done if a person, let's see here, his name is actually Namarty. If Namarty had simply done the small bit of due diligence to get that permit, I don't know what Seldon would have done. He probably would have just had to, let it go. But conveniently, Namarty didn't do that. And Seldon said, well, you didn't get permission. You need that. And he didn't say it, but I think he's kind of implying he probably could have gotten it if he just tried for it. At least one time. Maybe after that we can decide. But, he didn't even try. And he didn't have permission. And he says, well, you can't speak here. You have to leave. And Seldon himself is 40 years old. He still has this thing that he does as a 32-year-old in Prelude to Foundation, where he has some sort of a martial art they call twisting. What it's supposed to be, we don't really quite know. But at any rate, one of the Namarty's goons tries to kick Seldon off the stage, and Seldon instead does a little twisting. And Namarty's goons on the ground, the others are quickly on the ground as well. And then he just tells him, now get off the stage and go off our campus. And by the time he's done that, he was a popular professor, as professors go. And it was fairly easy for him to dispense the crowd. It's just this one guy. Well, so far so good. But twisting's already starting to get a little bit hard. And the question is, what does he want to do about this? Because obviously more than, he stopped the specific thing, event. But obviously there's a whole lot more going on. And in fact, so we talked a little bit about his relation with Doris Venigli and so forth, and a little bit about the other robot. And he hasn't been to see the Emperor or Demerzel since that initial period, 8 years previous. So, but he decides maybe he wants to try to have a discussion with Demerzel about that. He gets that schedule. In the meantime, another schedule comes along. Joranum is coming, wants to see Seldon, because Seldon's got this thing called psychohistory. He's investigated him, he found out about Seldon's paper, and he wants to try to get a psychohistory. Well, Seldon knows no psychohistory. The thing he did had nothing to do with psychohistory. It was just campus rules enforced by a popular professor, nothing more than that. But Joranum is just all, I think you got to, I want psychohistory. You got it, I want it, and you're going to give it to me. And I'll be your protector just like Demerzel if I can get you first citizen, which really is just a stepping stone to the Emperor, but at any rate. So, he goes ahead, he sees Joranum, but there's no love lost. He just kind of makes it clear. I couldn't give it to you even if I wanted to. I don't have a psychohistory, so forget it. And frankly, I see no reason to do anything but just keep Demerzel in there because I trust Demerzel. I know him well, blah, blah, blah. So, next thing he knows is he decides to have his son go and visit Jojo, who's supposed to be in the doll sector. Now, his son, Raych, along with Admiral Hugo Admiral, both came from the doll center, which was where Trantor's heat sinks are. So, because of that, that's kind of like a geothermal sort of powering of the planet. Okay. So, at any rate, the doll sector kind of gets looked down on because, you still seem to have times where people can actually be looked down on for the professions, never mind the fact that what they do is every bit as important as whatever, as anybody else to keeping the planet going, pull the plugs and see how everybody feels. Okay, it's that important. But they kind of get looked down on, and yeah, the Dallites are, well, they're like thick mustaches. They're mustachios, maybe even very burly, thick things, and they're kind of swarthy characters, a little on the shorter side than some of the other people there, and they kind of have this kind of low class way of talking. But it's just the way they talk. It's the language there. And Raych has some sympathy because JoJo's mug saying, well, let's have all the sectors be made equal. Doll's kind of, not equal. All the other sectors are more equal than Doll is, you could say. And that appeals to Raych. It seems like a reasonable idea. And so Hari Seldon sends his adopted son Raych into Doll, who he knows he's seen some schedule that Joranum is going to be there. So he goes in there and he meets up with JoJo, and he manages to say, well, there is something. I don't want to live in an empire run by a robot. What are you talking about? See, they found out something very interesting. JoJo, he claims to be from Nishaya, some far-off planet that nobody on Trantor's ever heard of. But Hari Seldon does some homework and discovers first he didn't come from Nishaya. He came somewhere else, and with some further figuring and deduction and so forth, he discovers that JoJo actually came from Mycogen sector. Again, they're great for their awesome food, but not much else. And kind of weird, and other than we'll pay top dollar for their food. Other than that, nobody else really wants much of anything to do with them. So he's trying to think, how can he exploit this? Well, Raych goes there. He's talking about this. I don't want to be ruled by no robot. Double negative kind of lowbrow speech pattern, the typical Dalek. He had no trouble lapsing into the way he talked up to when he was 12 years old, which is till then all he ever known. So, and he just goes to the store to get a Coke Icer, which they do in Dalite. I don't know what that is, but it sounds delicious. And suddenly these other Dalites are picking a fight with him, and then he's getting arrested, but then he's hauled in instead by these agents of Joranum. So, but he finagles his way to be brought into the guy. He's saying he doesn't want to be ruled by a robot. And Joe, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that would do very well. So next thing you know, Joranum is getting into saying, yeah, the first minister is a robot. What kind of emperor would take a robot for a first minister? Or is he just too dense to know the difference? I mean, remember, Demerzel's been there for a long time. All of Emperor Cleon's rule, plus quite some substantial period of Cleon's father's rule. And, I mean, we don't even know for sure, how much further back, but he's been there a long time, and yet he doesn't look any older now than, in the time of his father's rule. He doesn't age. He must be a robot. So, never mind the fact there are some folks who, even many years later can look astonishingly similar to how they did when they were younger. It does happen, but kind of unlikely. So, the Emperor is suddenly taking Hari Seldon and saying, what am I going to do? And all Seldon can tell him is, sire, don't do anything. What do you mean? This is terrible. Don't do anything. And without quite saying it, he kind of managed, probably more accidentally than not, in giving the Emperor the impression that I've got this under control, just let me work. Finally, the Emperor's, okay, I'll give you some time to do it. If it doesn't work out in a reasonable time, I may still try to have him executed, which would turn him into a martyr, and probably not be the greatest idea. So, at any rate, so he's got something going. And the something going is that Raych is going to do this little robot mover. But he doesn't want to be associated with it. That's okay. JoJo could find some other Dalite to say the same thing. No problem. Which he does. And they start getting these different videos of different Dalite people saying, I don't want to be ruled by no robot, kind of stuff. And next thing you know, it starts turning into this rumor. Well, the problem here is, and it's the only thing I'm not going to spoil, is how does Hari Seldon manage to destroy this mythos that Demerzel is a robot? It's a fact, yeah, I know, but it's not something we can have commonly known throughout the galaxy, and especially on Trantor. But at the same time, he's got to do it in a way that doesn't, he can't tell everybody, oh, he's a Jojo's a Mycogenian, because we don't want to do this based on bigotry. And they're being very, very careful and very cautious, and we don't do anything substantial. You don't want to mess with things and make big ripples in history. And you want to operate very smoothly and carefully. Yeah, I get that. So Cleon thinks he's got a psychohistory. Sire, I don't have a psychohistory. But maybe I can do something about this. He didn't even say quite that much, but the Emperor just kind of jumped on, well, I'm trusting you to take care of this. And if you don't, within whatever I consider enough time, I'll take care of it. Let's hope we don't have to go there. He's like, okay. But he does, in fact, have a plan in mind. And like I said, he'll carry out his plan. Jojo's reputation is permanently ruined. He's given a choice of either going to Mycogen, and the problem is he was a Mycogenian, he left them, and he's like somebody who, having left the group, is not very well approved or tolerated by the group. They would punish him pretty severely, maybe execute him, maybe put him away for life, hard labor, who knows what, but whatever it is, he's got a lot of harm coming to him. Well, can he go to someplace else? We have one other option. You say from Nishaya, how about you just go there, and we'll make sure you stay there, and you can just be there as a permanent exile. That's what Jojo does. He ends up doing. So he retreats as a coward, and his movement is basically pretty much destroyed. And it all seems a happy ending, except once they've done all this, Demerzel, our robot Daneel, suddenly decides it's time for me to leave. I think I've got other projects I'd like to go work on. Trying to save humanity or something. Work on that zeroth law, because there's a zeroth law of robotics that he invented. It kind of goes ahead of the first established 3 laws. So, but he does have some interesting suggestions at the end. Thank you for calling, but what am I to do without you, Daneel? Thank you for calling me that. I am Demerzel no more, only Daneel. As to what you will do without me, suppose you try to put into practice some of Joranum's ideas of equality and social justice. He may not have meant them, he may have used them only as ways of capturing allegiance, but they were not bad ideas in themselves, and find ways of having Raych help you with that. He clung to you against his own attraction to Joranum's ideas, and he must feel torn and half a traitor. Show him he isn't. In addition, you can work all the harder on psychohistory, where the Emperor will be there with you, heart and soul. So, and oh, by the way, you still have doors. Yes, I still have doors. So, that's a good section. It is really a complete story in its own right, even though it's part of the larger saga. But I like the way that the story really does stand on its own merit quite well. And it does come with a rather nice piece of artwork. There is a point where young Raych in the district of Dahl is getting surrounded by some of the ruffians, and he uses some of his skills, whether it's his fighting skills or his or maybe whatever he learned of twisting. It's never quite clear what's going on, but at any rate, there's a nice picture here. Just find it. Let's see where it is. And in this case, I think I can identify it. Okay. Now this guy here, this is obviously Raych using his hand to give one of these ruffians who came in the place where he just wanted to get coke icer. and really injured him bad, and just made it clear you ain't messing with me, buddy. So it's a nice picture. I like that determination on his face. And look at that mustache. Well, the other guy also has a pretty substantial mustache too, because that's they're Dallites. So there's Raych. His hair's kind of wild, and the face just furrowed, and I'm getting you. So that's kind of a neat thing that I didn't really have time to get into. So it's a good story, even in its own right, say nothing of how it fits into For the Foundation. Thanks for listening.